What languages have you worked with and stuff?
Mostly, well, I started with PHP,
Yeah.
which was horrible because it didn't support object-oriented.
Right.
In college, I did C++ mostly.
Yeah.
And
That's what I hear from most people. Were you
I
a
started with
computer
C++,
science major?
then Java at the end,
Okay.
J2E and web servlets and all that. But then when I started working, it was mostly C#. Like almost everything C# and PowerShell.
Okay, cool. Good to know. Interesting to hear from someone who's worked in the industry. Always looking to collect information.
Yeah, and we're really trying to get people like you actually in this area, in this arena, that might be able to give a talk about stuff that you experience too. So we're really trying to become a bit more in the industry, because we're relatively, I wouldn't say we're new. We've been here before. We've set up shop here before, but we're really trying to relaunch what we're doing here. And part of that is, bringing on a new face like me to try to teach people a little bit, to try to teach people about the industry, not just giving them in the classroom what they need in order to succeed in this environment, but also if we can help and if we can reach out to the members of the community that are already developers and try to get them to see what we're trying to do and develop a culture here of helpful teachers. That's what we're really trying to do. Like, you'll never hear from me say something like, oh, don't go to Galvanize, they're terrible. That's not the case. Like, boot camps we're all basically trying to do the same thing. We're trying to we see a huge need in this industry right now for qualified individuals. And we see a lot of potential for people that are, perhaps might not think that they are capable of doing this job, and showing them that they are. Like, really, this is a job you can do, and you shouldn't feel like you have to have that computer or that science degree in order to go do it. You don't have to have a mathematics background. You can just be a regular Joe Schmo that's been working at a construction site for 20 years and come in and learn how to do this stuff. It is possible. You can teach an old dog new tricks. You can. And hopefully it's my job to do it the right way, right? And teach that old dog how to do those new tricks. And if I do a good job at my job, then you guys can go on to have a successful career in an industry that is just ridiculously booming right now, right? It's just the growth. What is it, like 27% job growth by 2020?
7.4, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just, it's ridiculous. And I know I've also heard this statistic banded around that every 5 years, the number of developers doubles. So like Moore's Law was, every 2 years, the technology doubles. Well, I would call this the Bob Martin law, because that's where I heard it, where basically the software developers double every 5 years. Which means, if you think about that with a critical eye, you realize that half of the industry has less than 5 years experience. Oh, hey, we got a new one. Hey there. What time is it? Oh, we're getting close. We got those wanderers coming in, right? Oh, he said that he's going to be talking at 6:30, so.
You're welcome.
Just looking through my email, make sure there's no last minute. Steve, stop!
I thought this was at 6. I ran out of my job for this.
Oh.
You did not.
Technically, I ran out of my job 10 minutes early. I'm like, I gotta get there by 6. Stay for another 10 minutes.
Give everyone a second.
Hi there.
Settle.
I'm Steve. Hello. What's your name?
Howard.
Howard? Nice to meet you, Howard. I'm Steve. Yeah. Nice to meet you. So, let's see. I think we probably got some people that are going to be joining us online too.
Yep.
Let me just see. Do we have anybody there? Participants 3. Oh my goodness. Oh, you and George. Or maybe it's Jorge. last name is Vasquez, so I'm going to assume it's pronounced Jorge. Unless it's George. I don't know. George, tell us, is it George or is it Jorge? I don't know. I am from Phoenix, so I did get a lot of the mixed, we had a lot of Spanish speakers down there, so I know it could be one or the other. And I just want to make sure I know how to pronounce your name right. If you have any questions, I want to make sure I get it right. So, okay. I'll give it a couple more minutes. So, while I'm waiting for everybody to join us in, everybody here, I think, except for you, don't have coding experience, right? Everybody else does have some experience doing development. Yeah. Okay. And you said so C++, C#, PHP, pre-object-oriented PHP. Yeah. And you obviously have gone through .NET. You've done the whole stack before. Was your environment Agile? They claimed Agile, right? Yeah. Was it a Scrum environment? It was Scrum. Okay. How about you? Did you work in an Agile environment?
No, but I am actually a tester. And
okay.
I did some volunteer work with an institute. It's called Institute of Flight. I'm doing more with the web application testing, so I did user experience testing for the websites. And I am learning a bit about the Agile because
it's everywhere. Like it's become the way that people do it.
I know there's no other way that we can do it right now.
Yeah. And you said your name is Howard, right?
Yes.
I want to make sure I get that. Have you done any? Are you a previous developer? Did you do any software?
Development work. He's the president.
Oh, okay. .NET stack or Java?
Yeah.
.NET. Okay. So a lot of C#. Do you do anything with F#? No. No F#? Not into the functional stuff? Okay. How about you? Did you do any functional stuff with F#?
Never.
No? Okay. So we're not going to have any Haskell fans like, yeah, Haskell, yeah. No, none of that. Okay. So my name is Steve Bishop. I am the instructor here I do full stack instruction for your coder camps. So just who I am. I have been in the industry for over 15 years, both on the IT side and the software development side. So I have a pretty good mix. I guess probably a better fit for who I was and what I did was DevOps. That's the more popular term is DevOps, right? So I was also a SQL Server DBA for some of that time. I do full .NET stack, so I do ASP.NET Core now with MVC and APIs, and WinForms is thankfully getting off the shelf and going bye-bye. WPF is probably not too far behind it because we got UWP now. But yeah, so I do the full .NET stack too, but also JavaScript and HTML, CSS, jQuery. I also teach React JS here on this campus. I'm not as big of an Angular fan, but that's not because I don't like Angular. It's just because I'm a bigger fan of React. I think React is really, really cool. The way that they do a lot of their components, like React is just inherently component based. So you have everything in these nice little separated pieces, which is exactly what we're looking for in development, right? We're always looking for ways to make things more, bite-sized pieces that I can easily swap out, right? Solid principles, right? Solid principles. Single responsibility principle, open close principle, list-off substitution principle, interface segregation principle, and of course the dependency inversion principle. We should know what these solid principles are. It's not the point of the talk, but it is something that we should probably do. So I do have an emphasis on ASP.NET MVC and Web API, which is now Core. Right? They've gone from MVC 5 over to Core. The latest release of ASP.NET Core is obviously 2.0. I was working on Core back when it was in preview release 1. I've been doing .NET Core, so I've been on the bandwagon for quite some time. I was also an Agile coach for quite some time. The company I was working for was a consulting firm. So a lot of times I would go into companies and I would talk to them about Agile, like the talk I'm about to give to you guys, and kind of go over the ideas and the concepts about Agile. But I'm also going to challenge some of the norms that we see in an Agile environment. And I think you're going to see where I'm going with some of these challenges. I think that it leads to the heart of the problem that we generally find with Agile. Okay. I do have a website, programmingmadeeasy.com. That's where you can find a bunch of tutorials. You can find out more about me on there. I do some other stuff on there. But I work for Coder Camps now. I have gone from being the guy online to the guy that comes into the classroom and teaches people, because I like doing this stuff. I think you guys can probably tell I'm very excited, very energetic. It's kind of a good fit for me. So you can still see some of my old videos on Programming Made Easy, but I am now working for Coder Camps, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. I do have a Facebook page for that, Programming Made Easy, just facebook.com/Programming Made Easy, but you can also check us out on Coder Camps. You can go to our Facebook page there. I have a blog, and of course I have a Twitter. If you guys really want to see those things, you're more than welcome to. I'd give those to you later if you really want to, if you want to connect to me at some other point. All right, so, come on. No, Bluetooth, come on. There we go. Mpemba effect. Anybody heard of this before? The Mpemba effect. So there was a little 12-year-old Tunisian boy back in the 60s. His name was Erasto. Now, Erasto was in class, was in school, so he was getting an education, and one of the classes that he was going to was cooking school. That's one of the classes that they taught back then. And for one particular day, and what was a really exciting event for cooking class, was the day that they got to make ice cream. So here's a 12-year-old boy, he gets to go make ice cream in cooking class. So what does he have to do in order to go do making ice cream in cooking class? Well, he has to get some cream, he has to get some sugar, and he has to get some flavoring. Now, the way that you made ice cream back in the 60s, if you lived in Tunisia, is you took that cream, that milk, basically. You took that milk, you boiled it up to boiling temperature. Then you take the sugar and the different extracts like vanilla or whatever flavors you're going to put in there. You stick them in there while it's at boiling, and you stir and stir and stir, get it all mixed up nice and good in there. And then you wait until it goes from boiling to room temperature. Then after the ice cream or the cream that's all mixed up is done getting down to room temperature, you stick it in a freezer for about an hour to an hour and a half. Okay? That's the process back then to make ice cream. And that was how he was going to do it in cooking class. But there was a problem. Erasto forgot to go get the cream the night before the day they were supposed to make ice cream. So Erasto had to go to the general store before he went to class. Now, why was this a problem? Well, because all of the other students in class already got their milk up to boiling temperature and were starting to mix in their stuff by the time that Erasto arrived. So he's a little bit behind. While he is getting his ice cream all up to boiling temperature and he's stirring and mixing and all this good stuff, all the kids are waiting for theirs to get down to room temperature. Now, one unfortunate problem of living in Tunisia back in the 1960s is that there's only so much room in one of these ice boxes to put your ice cream into and wait for it. So he has to hurry up and get his ice cream done before the rest of the class does, if he's going to have ice cream. So by the time that he gets done stirring in and mixing all of his stuff, all the other kids are done waiting for theirs to get down to room temperature. And at the exact moment that his student, the kid sitting across from him, was done, he realized his was still at boiling temperature and everybody else was ready to go. So he had to make a split-second decision. And what he decided to do was take that boiling hot liquid and put it in the freezer with everybody else's room temperature. Now, this was a very, very risky proposition, because ice boxes, they can have some problems if you stick too many hot items inside of them. They can break down. Also, you have run the risk of everybody else's ice cream not freezing because yours is so warm that it makes everybody else's too warm. And so nobody has ice cream by the end of the hour. So he's running a very risky proposition. After about an hour to an hour and a half, the teacher says, okay, kids, go get your ice cream. So Erasto goes over to the ice cream box, to the ice box, pulls out his at the same time that the kid that sat across from him pulled his out. And lo and behold, what did Erasto discover? His ice cream was more frozen than the other kids. More frozen. And this perplexed Erasto. This really had him perplexed. So what did he do? Well, he was actually a very what's the word? He was a very curious kid. So he decided to try different liquids. Water, juice, orange juice, whatever he could get his hands on, any kind of liquid. And he would take one and he'd boil it and then take the other, leave it at room temperature, stick them both in the ice box, see which one froze. And of course, every single time, the one that was boiling would freeze faster. So fast forward a few years, Erasto's been doing this experiment. He knows it. He is so perplexed by it that he decides to go and ask his college professor when he's in college. He asks his college professor in front of the whole class, why is it that boiling hot liquids will freeze faster than room temperature liquids? To which the whole class laughed at him. The teacher laughed at him, but Erasto persisted. I'm telling you, boiling hot liquids freeze faster. So eventually, the professor was like, okay, I'll do the experiment just to prove you wrong. What did the professor find out? Sure enough, it froze much faster. The ultimate result of this was that Erasto is now an actual scientifically proven to his, let's say he has been published in many scientific journals that this is an actual thing. He's proven it, essentially. There's still some question marks about exactly how that happens. But here he is with his professor, just after, getting, he was doing an award. I think it was a Lifetime Achievement Award that he was getting there. So the question would be, well, why does that boiling hot water freeze faster than room temperature water? And this is an excellent question, but that is not what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about agile thinking. So, planning our projects. What's the problem with planning our projects? Well, we suck at it, right? We're terrible at this. But we think we are awesome at it, right? We think we're just the bee's knees. Now, we miss deadlines quite often, right? We miss our deadlines. We rush. We don't test properly, as some of us can attest to. We write stuff that doesn't even work, right? We write more stuff than we even need. We don't give the customer what they want. We can't change things after they're implemented, right? After we get them out there in the wild, sorry, it's in the production code now. It's almost impossible to take that out. It's there. Okay, we organize our code very poorly. And we give bad names to things. Very bad names to things, like public, void, the function that does stuff, but I don't know how it works. Int P. That's my parameter, P. So we've probably seen code like this, haven't we? Right? Really badly named functions and really badly named parameters. We have no idea what that thing does. So what's the result of all of this? Well, our client expects nice ravioli, kind of nice compartmentalized. You can think of this conceptually as like, it's been really well organized and put into like these little tiny bite-sized pieces that I could maybe cut them up with a fork, but I can bite into each one of them and get exactly what it is that I want from each bite. But what they end up receiving is that spaghetti code. We call it spaghetti code, literally because it looks like that, right? That's our code base. That is our code base. That's the code that we work with on a day-to-day basis. Oh, you want some new features? Here's your features. Okay? That's a pretty apt description of what it is that we do. This is what they want. That's what they get.
Is that the unadvertised feature too?
That is the yes, that is the Microsoft feature. Okay. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Microsoft, so I'm kicking at them a little bit, but I think everybody does to a certain extent in the industry because Microsoft is pretty well known for having bugs and then calling them features. It's just kind of oh, that's how it's supposed to work.
Even Joe Schmo like me knows that.
Yeah. So what can we do about it? What do we do about this problem? Well, that's where Agile comes into place. Now, Agile is really constructed around 4 core values. There's also 12 principles, but I'm not going to cover the 12 principles here. I'm only going to talk about the 4 core values because I think they are the essence of what the group in 2001 came up with. Okay. Now, understand that before I jump into Agile, let me just give you a little bit of background. There were several different groups that were trying to figure out the best way to build applications as a team of developers. There were people like Kent Beck, who was doing extreme programming, which was one of the more probably one of the higher, better, well-known ways to do it because he turned a Chrysler project that was absolutely abysmally failing and turned it into a lightning success. I think it was Chrysler. Was it Chrysler? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Chrysler. It was absolutely failing, and he turned it around. Like they had spent years and years and years trying to produce a product that just by the time that it was ready for release was completely obsolete. So he came in and actually within I think it was 2 years, he did what was originally decided, what was originally in the original scope that was supposed to be for 5 years plus more, using extreme. I could be wrong about all those figures. I don't remember the exact numbers, but you should look up Kent Beck and extreme programming and how that started. It's a very fascinating story. But there were other people there. There was one of my favorite guys is Uncle Bob Martin, Robert C. Martin. Just a spectacular guy, really good thinker. And he was there. Ken Schwarber was there. Come on. Oh, what's the guy? Martin Fowler. Martin Fowler is a very, very well-known name in this industry too. And he was there. There was a group of, I think it was 13 individuals that were at a place in, I want to say Utah. It was Utah. And they all decided to get together and ski and stuff, but they all decided we're going to have a conference and figure this out. We're going to come up with a system, a strategy for developers to work together to build better software from a developer's perspective. Okay? So what they came up with, and a very diverse group of guys, they have not ever come together again. They came together one time and never got together again. But what they did come up with was a very great set of 4 core values. The first value reads individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. This is a value. We value this. Individuals and interactions. We value over processes and tools. We value working software over comprehensive documentation. I want working software. I value that more than I value comprehensive documentation. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Work with the customer. Don't necessarily work on the details of the contract and the negotiation of the contract. Us as developers, we should be trying to value the customer collaboration part. And then finally, responding to change over following a plan. Respond to changes in the environment. Respond to those things. That is more important than just following a plan blindly because we have a plan. That's what we're going to do. You had a question?
Yes. When you say customer collaboration, are you talking about end user or within when you have, when you're programming for somebody, you got a project, and then are you?
It's whoever your client is. It could be anybody from your boss could possibly be who your customer is.
Yeah.
Or in more typical to what they're speaking to, it would be if I'm building a piece of software for somebody, then that's who my customer is. Find out what they want. What are their desires with how this software is supposed to work? Okay, and that is more important than having a really good contract in place that denotes exactly, we have a system in place that if you're going to ask for more features, what you need to do is send us an email to this particular address, and it needs to have a proper scope of work. We'll fill all of that out for you, send that back to you. You go ahead and confirm that. Then we'll have one of our HR staff look over it and review it with the lawyers. And then, that's nonsense. Like, that's not what we as developers are really caring about. What we care about is talking to the customer, get their input. That is more important than the contract. Okay. This is written from the developer's perspective, not necessarily the business person's perspective. The company owner, the CEO, the CIO, CTO, those guys are not so much interested in this, right? So just understand there's some different motivations here. Agile, as its original intent, was written by developers for developers, not business CEOs, CTOs, CIOs, et cetera, okay? It was written by developers for developers. And for customers, yes. But exactly, we, as developers, how can we better serve the customer and ourselves, right? So, well, there is value in the items on the right. So we value those things over here. We actually value the ones on the left more. So we're not saying we don't need to worry about processes and tools, or we don't need to worry about documentation. We don't need to worry about a contract, and we don't need to follow any sort of plan. That's not what the case is. We're saying we value these things on the left more than we value those things on the right. Not to say those things on the right aren't important, they're just not as important as those things on the left. Okay. Now, you can find out more about the Agile Manifesto as it stands just by going to agilemanifesto.org. Okay, it's a really, really basic website. Like, it looks like somebody wrote it in 1995. Okay, it's very, very basic. But it gives you all the information you need about Agile Manifesto. Okay, they'll give you these 4 core values and the 12 principles. So let's take a look at each one of these values and kind of like scope in on them a little bit. Okay. So if we emphasize individuals and interactions over these processes and tools, what might that look like? What would that look like in our day-to-day environment? Well, we would better utilize the strengths of the team, because we're talking about individuals and interactions within the team. Okay? I'm not going to just shoot you an email. I'm going to go over to your desk and talk to you. Okay? So if I do that, if I emphasized individuals and interactions over having some sort of process and tool, then I'm going to better utilize the strengths of the team. I'm also going to have much better planning. I'm going to get new ideas, because think about it. How many new ideas come from emails? How many new ideas come from group conversations? Right? Where do the good ideas come from? They come from those tough discussions in person. They don't come from emails. Now, there's some that do come from emails, but usually, you get the idea. It's much easier to help each other. If I get to know you on a personal level, my interest level in helping you succeed is going to be much higher. And yours, conversely, in my success is going to be there, right? So it's much easier to help each other out. I don't have to think about, okay, what's the communication path that I need to go to? Is he going to be on Skype? Is he on Instant Messenger? Do I need to send him an email? I've got Slack. Okay, those are all great ways to communicate with each other, but if we just emphasize talking to each other more than using those tools and setting up tools, and I have 5 different ways that I can talk to you. Well, that's not as good as just simply getting up off my desk and going over to talk to you. Okay? There's also better accountability. And this may not immediately become apparent, but if you think about it, If I'm having a talk with you and we're discussing the software and I say, oh, this is what I'm working on, and then if I don't follow through on that, the people that I just told I was going to do that to all know that I did not do what I said I was going to do. I am being held accountable just because I told them that's what I was going to do. Just having these organic conversations with people about what it is I'm doing, what I'm working on. And then finally, this is kind of a big one, better naming conventions and programming style. Because others have to read it, and I'm talking to those other people, and they're pointing out, Steve, you silly nincompoop, why did you name it that? And because we're having all this good fun time talking to each other, they're gonna feel comfortable opening up to me and saying, hey, Steve, what were you thinking? Okay? So, we talked about the benefits of it, but how do we actually do this? Like, how do we put those ideas into place? Well, on a daily basis, we should be discussing our progress. Daily. I've gotten this far on this function. Yes, it has taken me the last 2 months, but it's a really freaking bad bug. And it's taking 5 other systems that I need to go touch to fix it. But at least I'm progressing. I can tell you about it. Discuss that progress. Parking lots, which are basically more in-depth discussions that you save for later. Okay? Parking lots are a mechanism that's very popular in Agile, especially Scrum, where essentially you have a daily stand-up meeting where you're all talking around. And you take like a 15 minutes every morning to talk about what it is you're doing for what you did yesterday, what you're doing today. And then if there's anything that sprouts up from that discussion where somebody says, hey, I was touching the code base that you're working on right now, let's go talk about it afterwards. That's what a parking lot is. Go talk that time to go talk about it later. Okay, paired programming. This is where you and someone else work on the same exact thing at the same time. It's literally someone staring over your shoulder watching you code or vice versa. And at first, this may seem very intimidating. But as you get used to it, it's actually very comforting. Especially if you have good interaction with that person that you're working with, like if you get along. It's an extremely effective way to program because you cut down on so many mistakes and you can realize together a better way to do something that you might have otherwise overlooked. Somebody else has a better strategy for, somebody knows a pattern to handle this particular issue that I never thought of. Like, how many of you come across a select case statement? A select case, right? A select statement, switch, switch. My VB brain kicked in there for a second. Switch case. Switch case, you guys worked with switches, right? How about an if with a bunch of else if statements? Yeah, a little bit of that. Has anybody heard of the strategy pattern? Strategy pattern. It's a pattern for development that essentially eliminates any need for if, else if, or select case, or switch case. It gets rid of it. There's no need for it. It's a really cool pattern because it's part of the solid principles. It's a really great pattern. It's an amazing tool when you realize it, especially in the context of solid principles, right? Essentially, you no longer have a hard-coded yes or no on something. Okay? There's no yes or no. You actually pass a class to this thing that says, okay, if this is true, then go do this thing, but what you're passing it is both the question and the answer. It's just strategy pattern. Go look it up. It's really cool. Okay, moving on. Using communal areas. How often have you seen or know of somebody who sits at their desk all day and that's all that they do? They never get up, except to maybe go to the bathroom, go get their food from the fridge. They eat at their desk. They don't use the communal areas for anything unless they have to because there's a meeting. I gotta go to the meeting. Okay? Virtual ones do work. I ask this one all the time. Why do you have programs like Skype or, yeah, Skype's a good example, where you can have like a visual virtual channel where everybody can go into one place at one time and chat? Why do you have that but not ever use it? Because we have it, we just never use it. Why can't that be a communal area? If I'm really stuck at home, I don't work at a particular place, I don't work on site, I work from home, but I'm part of this group, couldn't I use a Skype communal area to go chat with all these friends, with all these people I work with? Instead of just using it as, oh, I need to go talk to so-and-so so we can do a code review. That feels like every time I'm gonna open up Skype, I've gotta go, it's for work purposes. I don't like this. I don't like have to use Skype because I always have to talk to Jenny, and Jenny is always just such a pain to talk to. Okay? No, we should be using communal areas. We should be talking together. Get those people involved that are not on site, get them involved by having a virtual communal area. Like there's nothing better than, we had just here, we had a big old virtual meeting where everybody from the whole company got together and we were virtually involved. It wasn't as good as being there, but it's a heck of a lot better than just getting an email about the conference or having a conversation afterwards from someone who was there. I get to be kind of a part of the group. They get to wave at me, I get to wave back at them. Okay, moving on. So we've talked about the daily process. We're gonna get more into iterations a little bit. You guys know what iterations are if you've done any sort of Agile before, but essentially you can think of this as a unit of work. Okay, a certain time frame by which we're going to get this much work done. In Scrum, you guys called this time boxing. Okay? A sprint, yes. A sprint is a form of time boxing, right? So per iteration or sprint, you are going to do some things. Recap your past successes. Talk about what you just got done. Yes, go team, yeah. Okay? It seems cheesy. I know it seems cheesy all the time. Like, do I really have to go to this meeting and talk about all the stuff that we just did? Like, can't they just look at the repo and see what we did? Why do I have to talk about it? Self and team assignment of features. Now, this is one I don't think too many people actually do. Not a lot of companies do this. Self-assignment of tasks. I will work with Jenny to get that done. That is a completely different way of achieving the goal than to have some sort of project manager, product owner tell you you're going to do that feature. Now, why would this be beneficial for me to self-assign as opposed to being assigned by somebody? If you think about it, how am I going to feel about doing that particular task if it's been assigned to me versus if I said I would do it, I'm going to do it, or we're going to do it? It's a little bit of a different attitude. You're going to feel a little bit more positive about what you're trying to do. And not only that, but you can kind of say, hey, that's in my alley. I'm good at that. Let me go do that, because that's what I'm good at. Whereas there's a possibility that maybe you're not so good at something that's been assigned to you, and it's going to take you a lot longer to get it done, and therefore put a delay on the product. Especially if we're doing a lot of time boxing where, oh, you've only got like 2 hours to get this bug fixed. You've got this much time to get that sucker fixed, and if you don't, then we're going to have to just move on, and you might just get fired because you didn't get it done in time. But it was in a subject that I don't really know that much about. Couldn't we have just handed this over to Dave, who does that stuff like every day for breakfast? He like sits, I've seen him with a bowl of cereal and his laptop open. I've seen him working on this very thing. Why can't we give him that? Right? But it's too late because now it's been assigned to you, right? Okay. Now let's talk about the second value. Working software over comprehensive documentation. Working software. Working, not partially working, not, oh, we're really close to having this done. Oh, it only breaks when you click on that button after that button. Okay, actually working software that you can demonstrate and has been properly QA'd. Okay, working. So, if we valued working software over comprehensive documentation, what kind of results would we expect to see from this? From the customer or user side, they'd have positive reinforcement. Every time that development team works on something, by golly, it works. Every new release, I don't have like 2,000 bugs that I got to tell them about and report. It works. I feel good about that team because I know I'm going to tell them a bug and they're going to get it fixed. Visible progress. They're actually going to see some progress in the product. I can see the changes actually happening from version to version because every time I clicked on that button when that other studio was working on it, every time I clicked on the button and reported that it wasn't working, they said, oh yeah, we're going to get fixed. And then they went and worked on some accounting thing, which Janie's really, really happy about, but I'm still stuck with this program that's not working. What kind of visible progress am I going to see if what I need keeps breaking? Okay. It's also a much better foundation for communicating your future planning. Because now that we have working software, we can go from one set of working software to another set of working software. We have progress. We have a good foundation. Here's where we are now. We know that what we have is working. So we can move on to the next feature. Now that I know this is good, I can move on to the next thing. And that is important. That is key for keeping that relationship with your customer, right? Having some sort of software that we all know the state of the software. Not, I have a development version on my box that's working just fine. I don't know why yours isn't. Okay? That's not a very good foundation for talking about the problems. They're going to keep coming at you with a bunch of problems, and you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Okay. As far as your coworkers, if you're all working on making working software together, you have tangible milestones. You do this because you need to make tangible milestones. In order to get to working software, you better darn well have some milestones you can reach. Because if you don't reach those milestones, you won't have working software. Confidence in both the software you're working on and the abilities of the team. If every time we do a release of working software, I know it's working. Just like the customer knows that it's working, they're getting positive reinforcement. I'm getting the same positive reinforcement. Because I know that that software is in good standing. It works. And by golly, we got it there. This wasn't just one guy that just, magically sprinkled some fairy dust on it to make it work. We all worked together. We did all what we needed to, and we can see a working piece of software that's doing exactly what it should be doing. We are confident now in what we can do with this product. We also have more thoughtful development because we as a team have to start filtering out all of those extra little things that might lead to not working software. We have to think more thoroughly about what it is we're doing. And that leads to much better, more well thought out software. Better time management, because we're going to work in shorter, easier to reach deadlines. Okay? We're going to have much better time management because we're not going to set up a 6-month plan. I'm going to release that feature in 6 months. Don't worry about it. I got you. Okay? No, that's not how you do it. Okay? Because then once that 6-month time rolls around, you're like 5 months and 3 weeks away, or 5 months and 3 weeks into it, and you realize, oh crap, I promised delivery on that time. And the feature I was supposed to be working on is only half completed because Joe, who left the company in month 4, is gone, and I have no idea how much of this he got done. I don't know. I'm just gonna have to figure it out. So the time requirements are much more measurable. This is also a side effect. I can actually figure out, I can plan, now that I know how long it takes me to do this bit, I kind of have a good idea how much it's going to take me to do that little bit. Now that I know this, and I've consistently delivered in this amount of time that much work, I think I can pretty well predict what it's going to be in the future. Okay? So how do we get there? How do we get to working software? Develop in small iterations, not big ones, not 6 months, not 8 months, not 1 year. And the type of size that I'm talking about everybody freaks out about this, is 1 week to 4 weeks. Yep, 1 week to 4 weeks. Okay? If you are a sole developer working all by yourself, I give you a little bit more leeway and say 4 weeks is probably a good iteration time. Anything that you're planning beyond 4 weeks of your working path, you are planning too far ahead and you are stretching your time too much. You cannot predict what's going to happen in 1 month's time. What if you get in a car accident? What if the customer is no longer there? What if the client that you've been talking with, the person that is your contact within that company is no longer working there? If you planned on having that, even more than 1 month out, there's a possibility that your plans could completely change, be completely upended. So you work in small iterations. Now, define done. Who's heard this before? Define done. What does it mean to be done? In order to be working software, I better be done. Like done. Not, oh, I got a little bit left to do. Don't worry, I'll release it, and then afterwards I'll finish that up. No. What is done? Get done. Things like, what about testing? Have you tested all of it? Should that be part of what determines whether or not it's done and working? Because by golly, if I release something that hasn't been tested, can I be with 100% confident it's working? Probably not. What about deployment? Is deployment part of it? Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Sometimes deploying out to a production environment, making it production worthy, is not necessarily the goal of the iteration. It's not all that common, but it typically does happen. Like it's not, that's a contradiction in the statements, isn't it? It's not something that you do all the time, but it is something that commonly happens where you do need to have like some refactoring process of the development environment, okay? Because we got some things going on in our development side that just don't match up to our production. We're, as a team, going to focus on what's in development right now. We're not going to push any of that to production just yet. Okay, that happens. What about packaging? Do I need to put this in an MSI package? Do I need to create an installer? Do I need to reversion it? Speaking of which, yeah, what about versioning? Is this a major version release? Is this a minor version release? Is this just an update? What is this? I have to worry about versioning. So all of those questions we got to be asking ourselves just to figure out what does it mean to even be done? How much of this is actually even programming? Software development, where we're coding. Like none of that. Right? None of that is even coding. That's just to figuring out all these different things that we got to figure out just to figure out what's done before we've even written one line of code. What about documentation? There's another big one. Should we document all of this? I could probably go on for about an hour about why I don't document. I don't document. What? Huh? What? Huh? I don't provide documentation. Now, if my customer wants documentation, I can write some documentation, but there's also things like Swagger. Pretty cool. But I myself don't write any codes. I don't write any code lines that have comments. I have no comments in any of my code, period. Seriously. Seriously.
Yeah,
I can talk for an hour about why.
Oh, my.
Yep. I do not. Okay. There's a very common, very popular statement. It says this. Comments or code never lies. Comments sometimes do. Code never lies. Comments sometimes do. There's a really good reason. There's a really good book called Clean Code. It was written by that guy I mentioned before, Robert C. Martin. Agile Principles, yeah, he wrote the book. He literally wrote the book on Agile Principles. Like, that's the guy. That's why I'm a big fan of his. And he, don't document. Do not document. Because if you're writing documentation, and I know this is controversial, I know there's a bunch of people that are probably already screaming at the monitor, hi, I see you over there, that are like, what, don't document? But I know how, yeah, okay. You're probably told, I have seen document that is like, ridiculously there, but then what happens in a month when the code base changes, but they don't change the comments? I have comments that are lying to me. And it wasn't the fault of the developer. It was because I was fixing something and I didn't think to go to the comments to go fix the comment. I was trying to fix the thing. And it happens all the time. All the time. If you have to write comments in your code, it means either A, you're not naming things very well, or B, you are not making things small enough. It's one of those two things. If you have to write a comment, you are not making your code small enough, or you are not naming things very well. It's a fact. If you really, really get down to it, that is the crux of the problem. You are not naming things in a way that makes it understandable, or are you making things too big that you have to explain what's going on inside of the code. It's one of those two cases. Okay. Anyway, that's the short end of that particular lecture that I'm sure a lot of people would be very interested in hearing. Okay, customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Let's take a look at this. So customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Collaborating with customers. Ew! Customers! I'm a developer. I don't deal with customers. All right, well, imagine a world where better communication of ideas happens. You've entered the Twilight Zone. You would get a better communication of ideas with your customers if you just talk to them. Anybody ever play telephone when you were a kid, like in elementary school or even kindergarten? And you have like the line of you, right, or all, and then one person starts at one end and says, you know, says a word or a phrase or something, and then it gets passed around. And then by the time he comes to the other end, it's not anything at all what was originally said. It doesn't even take that many steps before it's completely wrong, right? Like they'll even say, what did you hear? What did you hear? What did you hear? And by like the fourth person, it's completely wrong. So why wouldn't we just talk to the customer? We're the developers trying to figure out this thing and what the customer wants, but if we have to talk to two other project managers in order to figure it out, what's the problem here? Go talk to the customer. Get their email. Hey, I'm working on this thing for you. I'm just kind of curious. I'm just looking for a little explanation here. I'm just kind of curious. Can you help me out here? Oh yeah. Now, guess what? Now they, the customer, what's going to happen with the customer if they have a developer asking them questions? That's where people don't get a little on the frightened side.
But isn't that why you have a product owner for the
I'm going to challenge that idea.
A non-technical project owner, you mean?
Exactly. A product owner, by design, by the intent of Scrum, is not supposed to be a developer.
Yeah, he better understands the customer.
He understands the customer, but doesn't necessarily understand the developer. What? Why is a person who is not a developer talking to a customer about development? You see the problem with that?
Absolutely.
But that is Scrum. Like, that's a tenet of Scrum. That is a very big, major point of concern. A product owner is not supposed to be a developer. They are not part of the development team. Huh.
I was just gonna say, what happens if they used to be?
Yeah.
Like on the team I work on. Our product owner is
Yeah.
on them.
What happens if they leave? What happens if they go on vacation? What happens if there's an emergency over the weekend and you can't get a hold of that product owner? Right? You're totally screwed. The customer's screwed. You're screwed. You can't get a hold of the person, the only person that knows this information. And there's only one of them. There's only one of them. What is wrong with this picture? But yet it is exactly, so I could go on for a while about Scrum. I like Scrum to a certain extent. Okay, it is better than nothing. It is better than nothing. Okay, I'm just gonna say that. It's better than nothing. Now, I happen to like vanilla ice cream with chocolate chunks. I'll take Rocky Road. Rocky Road's a good ice cream. Works. Got some of the stuff I'm looking for, but it's really not the solution for me. Okay? So that's what I'm going to say about Scrum. I've done Scrum. It's a perfectly fine mechanism. I will just tell you though, it was not written for developers. It was written for business people. It was written because it is a process. How much of what I've talked about is a process? Nothing. I'm talking values. What do we value as developers? Not a process.
There's a few way arounds about that. There's you can actually include like in the planning and the retrospective, you can actually include the customer in there.
Yes.
At that point,
So they're in that contact with the developers and the testers and whoever else.
Yes. At a very prescribed period of time.
Yeah.
Yes. And still all of the communication about what the developers get on a daily basis or a weekly basis or iteration basis is strictly from the product owner. And unfortunately, that just leads to a lot of misinformation, a lot of misinformation, okay? So I challenge, again, I don't think Scrum is bad. I don't think it's bad. It is much better than not having anything, okay? And there's plenty of not having anything. That's all, that's ubiquitous in the industry. So I don't have, like my qualms with Scrum are like this. I'm going to magnify them when people ask me about it because it's like, I gotcha. Okay. You say you're agile. No, it's not really agile. But for them, it's a very close facsimile of agile. Okay. It's very, very close to agile. So I'm going to take that over having nothing. Okay. But yeah, so customer collaboration, back to this here. So if we had customer collaboration over contract negotiation, we'd have a better understanding of what the user's needs are. Like if they are telling us exactly what they need, I as a developer who's about to write that line of code know exactly why they want it. I am going to be better prepared to make decisions because I have talked to them directly. I know what their needs and wants are. If I get it from a product owner or a project manager, there's some other person interfering in that conversation, and they have their own motivations and ideas about things. Okay? So there is a very high likelihood I am going to be writing a line of code that I then have to ask again to get clarification before I go write this. Are you sure this is what I want to do? But if I heard it directly from the customer, I know the answer. I know exactly what they're trying to do because I talked about it with them. Okay. Plan from the perspective of the user. If your user is talking to you, you are going to be thinking in terms of what they're telling you. You're going to be planning in terms of what they want from you. You are not going to be planning in terms of the product manager, what they want from you. Okay. So I'm going to be planning things from the perspective of the person that's talking to me, telling me what they want, not somebody else. And it's easier to discuss potential risks and rewards. Okay, now this is kind of an in-the-weeds one and kind of takes some experience to really grasp and understand. But really, once you have a good communication line with the customer, you can start telling them no. You can get to that point where you can say no. You don't understand. Okay, you don't understand. How many times have we been in a situation as developers where the product owner tells us this has to be done, and you're like, that is so ridiculously dumb. There's no way that's going to be done. I can't do that. That can't be done. Now, if you're upfront and honest with a customer that you have a good communication line with, you can have that conversation. You can say, look, I get where you're trying to go with that. Maybe we can come up with an alternative because I, as the developer, understand how I can make an alternative to that. I get what you want, but I can't do it that particular way, so let me offer you a different way to do it. Now, if I had to do that through a product owner or project manager, that ain't happening. Product owner says, I got this from the customer, you do it. Right? That's exactly how it happens. And it's no fault of the product owner. I'm not trying to bash on product owners.
well, it's actually fault. I differ with you. That is the problem of the product owner. The product owner should say no because that is his job, right?
I agree.
I think that is on the product owner.
In reality, how much does that happen?
In my case, often.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
You are very lucky then, sir. You are very lucky, sir. a product owner that is willing to tell a client no. That is like a remarkable feat. I would like to meet your product owner so that I can shake his hand personally, because I would like to know his internal secrets about how he is able to communicate with the customer and tell him no, while not even understanding the programming base. Not knowing any of the code base, being able to tell a customer no and why. Because the customer is going to ask why, right? Yeah. Product owner says, oh, we can't do that. Why? Let me go get back to my devs. They'll tell me why. Now who's at fault in that situation, right? The customer thinks the dev is the one at fault, and they don't understand. They get angst about that developer. How much do I trust that developer now? But if the developer comes to me and actually says, look, I can't really do that. I really can't. I'm sorry. I feel bad because I just can't do that. Or if we do want to go that route, like I'm going to tell you it's possible, but here's some of the risks involved in doing that. I will leave that up to your decision. But let me explain a little bit about why I think that's a bad idea, and let me give you an alternative. Okay? That's ideal, right? I'm not saying that that's like what's going to happen under these circumstances, but in my opinion, having a product owner, unless you are really, really lucky, 9 times out of 10, that product owner is just going to throw you under the bus. Okay? And it's not their fault. I'm not blaming product owners. They are in a tough situation because the system is designed to make them in a tough situation. And we could easily rectify that. We could very easily rectify that by not giving them that job. A lot of product owners just hate me right now. But I learned Scrum so that I could be a product owner. Don't worry, you will have plenty of work. I promise you, you have plenty of work. Scrum is everywhere, and product owners, they're like one step away from good salesmen. They really are. Like, you got to be like the best salesman ever in order to be a product owner. So I give kudos to product owners. I really, really do. You guys have in my opinion, one of the worst jobs in the development industry. It's one of the worst jobs. I would not want to be a product owner. All right, moving on. Fewer ambiguous questions and incoherent requests. Oh boy, is that one big. Think about that one for a second. If a customer and you are having a conversation about the product and how it's being designed, and they are intimately familiar with what you're doing because you're talking to them regularly about what it is you're doing, are they going to have a ton of questions that don't make any sense? Because they're talking to you. Remember, I'm talking about the ideal scenario here. They're talking to you regularly, know what it is you're doing, and keeping you on task too. You get to communicate with them regularly about what it is you're doing. Are they going to be asking a bunch of questions that come out of left field? It's possible, but a lot less of them, right? A lot less of them. Now, it's this tricky little teeter-totter there. There is the possibility that if you are not an effective communicator, that there could be more of those. There could be. If you are not good at explaining things to them. And this is one of the hardest parts about our jobs as developers, is explaining what it is we do to other people.
That's probably the reason why you really need a product owner between you and the customer.
But this is another why, and I would like to put this one up. It actually makes you a much better developer. Because if I can communicate what I'm doing, how much better do I know what it is I'm doing? Right? It's like one of the reasons I like being a teacher. I like being a teacher because I get to go learn stuff, and like it doesn't take me very long from when I like get something first in my head to, okay, now I got to explain it. Oh, now it all makes sense.
That's when you actually learn.
That's when you actually learn. Imagine you're talking to some person that has no idea about coding, and here you are talking to them about what it is you do on a daily basis. How much better of a coder are you going to be? Yes, their questions might be annoying. Yes, there might be some of these incoherent and ambiguous requests, but the more you communicate, the better you get at it, the fewer and fewer of those there will be. All right? So how do we do this? How do we get customer collaboration over contract negotiation? Well, you have regular meetings with the customer. Not regular meetings as a team, regular meetings with the customer. Get them on site. Get them in the retro, as we're talking about. Heck, why are they not even a part of like the planning phase? Why aren't they there? This is what we're planning on doing. These are the features that we think are the most important. That's what a product owner is typically going to do. But why not have the developers in on that conversation?
I just spoke with a friend of mine, and they are in the Agile environment, and they are totally having a different opinion. I mean, like the developers are not having a say when it comes to
Exactly. I have
She's
no
having
say. I have
It's
no
real.
say as a developer.
It's real.
Yeah, I have no say. Why can't I talk to the customer? Why can't I say no to the customer? Why can't I do those things? I get it. I got a product owner. That's their job. They get paid well for doing that. It's a hateful position. Nobody wants to be that guy or gal. But if I could have like direct communication with the like if I could just, yo, Joe, look, I'm on like line 25 of this function you're writing me, and or you want me to write, and it's like ridiculous, dude. I'm telling you right now, it's gonna cost like a whole bunch more money. I really don't think we should necessarily do that. Like, is that a product owner conversation or is that a developer conversation? Is the product owner gonna be able to get on the phone with the customer and say, like, look, we're like part of the way into this, we're realizing that it's gonna be way more difficult and way more complicated.
Yeah.
That can happen if the developer is talking to the customer. If you have a third-party intermediate person, that is not a conversation that happens. You just get so far down the road where you're like, I totally give up. I can't get this done in time. Oh, well, let's charge the customer anyway for something we don't even deliver. How happy are they? How happy am I? Okay, all right. So have in-person meetings with them. Talk to them in person. Go to their site. Have them come to your place. Hey, we're going to do a retro. Why don't you guys come on down? You get to meet the whole crew. Come on down. You can get out of the office. Get out of the office. Come down and say hi to us. It's part of the work. I'll swear to it. I told you after lunch, why don't you come down, come over here. You can get out of your work. You can come down and have the retro with us. Meet all the crew. It's legitimate work. They're going to be happy to get out of their office. I promise you, they'll be happy to get out of their office. Now, if you can't do it in person, conference calls. But if you're going to do a conference call with them, preferably do it with video. Okay, it's just more personal that way. The more personal you can be with the customer, the more they're going to like you. Until they hate you because you said no. Too many times. All right, email should be a last resort. Last. I cannot tell you how many times I see an email go off to a customer and I think, oh, just pick up the phone, tell them that in person. I get we're not all talking, we all like text messages and emails, but you'd be amazed at how much more effective you can be as a developer if you're actually talking to the customer. Getting their attitude about something. Heck, even an apology to the customer. A warm, heartfelt apology. I'm sorry. We just are not going to be able to get this done under budget. I know that's what you wanted, but it's just not going to happen. I'm sorry. All right, well, what can we do? Well, that's when you have those conversations, right? But if you're just doing it in an email, God damn it, I'm just to pay that guy, and I can't believe that he's doing that. And all he's going to do is send me a freaking email? He's just going to send me an email. That's what he's going to do? Oh, man, I can't wait. Okay. That's how you tell me you're going to come out over budget? You send me an email. You jerk. Why couldn't you pick up the phone and tell me? Call me. Have me come over, explain it to me, show me. Show me where at least you are. How close are we to this? But no, you send me an email that says, I'm sorry, we're going to be over budget. Here's your invoice. Right? I got a hand up. Oh, he's writing it down. Must be really good.
Yeah, what you said is really effective. I don't lose that train.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. It's I'll sit here and wait and watch you write.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so regular meetings on a per iteration basis, we should be doing these meetings, by the way. This should not be come in every 6 months, every 3 months, come check out the place. No, this should be like every iteration. It really should be. At least talk to them. If you can't bring them on in person, pick up the phone, call them, talk to them. Hey, this is what we got planned. Is that good with you? I mean, that's essentially replacing the job of a product owner, right? That's what a product owner basically does is for iteration, they go talk to the customer, go figure out what the new features are that they want to do. Okay. But if we can do this as a development team rather than having a product owner do it for us, it's just going to be better.
This leads me to another question, if you don't mind. And this is to everyone here. How often does the product owner will promise and have the developers try and deliver?
All the time.
It happens all the time.
Like 99% of the time. Product owners tend to overpromise because they kind of have to. They're in a position where they have to. They don't necessarily know that the best they're going to get is this key concept called velocity is what they're going to try to use to predict how many of the features that they can promise in an iteration for delivery. It's a measurement of how much work has been done over the course of time. In the past, the developers have been doing it. So they're going to use that metric as best as they can to try to predict how many of these features. But that completely ignores the stuff that might come up in between. So, and really, the developers know better how long something is going to take than a product owner.
Usually there's, sorry to interrupt.
No,
there's a few activities that actually help. Something that I usually do is the planning poker. It's pretty much you put in a room all the developers of a feature, and then you can actually add the complexity of each one of these stories or the tasks, whatever you want to do it, or epics, right? And then you can actually discuss, like everybody said, you have a discussion of why something is more or less complex. And at the end, everybody agrees into like a number of complexity.
Sure.
That complexity, you can actually kind of more or less measure of how much time it's going to take. It's not going to be completely accurate.
And the developers need to do it, right?
Yeah,
the developers need to be the ones predicting how long this is going to take, not the product owner. But the person who's deciding which features are going to be put into an iteration or a sprint is typically the product owner.
If the product owner is the one that is setting those complexity and those numbers, that's when it's going to fail because it's not going to know what is the right number. You're going to see overestimating in the future.
Yeah,
a collaboration between the developers will probably shift out.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and typically also this poker concept that he uses, that he's talking about, uses the Fibonacci scale. Which essentially means that it is all of the basically like 1, 1, 2, 4. No wait. Oh no, I'm totally. Oh come on, I know my Fibonacci scale.
I know it too. It's like 1, 1, 2,
3.
1, 1, 2, 3. That's what it is.
And
it's
then
the
3
previous
plus
2
2,
numbers.
5. 5
and then 5
8.
and then 8. Yeah, that's what it was. And 11. I knew it was supposed to be weird. I know this. I know the Fibonacci scale. I do. I was thinking of the for some reason what popped into my head was adding all the previous numbers to get the next number, and that's not the right one. That's not Fibonacci. Anyway, moving on. Uh-oh. I am on the wrong thing. Okay. Demonstrations. Do demonstrations with your customers. Not internal demonstrations. Not so you can all pat yourselves on the back about all the great stuff. That's also, there's times to do that. But if you can do that while you also have the customer on site doing the same demonstration, by golly, that's good. Because they get to see what's working and what's going to be coming up next. Collect bugs. Collect bugs. Bugs, they're everywhere. Okay? But that's what we should be doing. If we're going to collaborate with the customer, we need to be collecting those bugs. We need to know what's wrong. And if we get, and that's another thing. How many bugs are written in such a way that make absolutely no sense to the developer? I do not understand what this customer is telling me is the problem. How can I possibly fix it? Well, if you pick up the phone and ask the customer, hey, what are you doing? When you get that message, what's happening? Show me your screen. Take a snapshot. Show me a picture. Let me see what it is you're talking about. Oh, so when you're clicking on File and then New, that's when you're getting the problem. Not the New button that we added like 3 weeks ago that I thought you were talking about. That happens, right? That happens all the time.
So if you have an application which was properly QA'd,
Uh-huh.
this is much easier
Yes.
to do because there'll be lot less bugs. They'll be really bugging
Yeah.
you.
If the QA team is able to actually ask the customer, what the heck are you talking about? Woo! But typically, QA especially, you are stuck in a situation where you get a ticket, right, an issue ticket, and it's like, okay, I think I know, but now I'm gonna spend the next hour exploring what this issue says on paper, whereas if I would have just talked to the customer, it would have taken my 5 minutes, right? But you can't have that line of, it's like forbidden. You are forbidden from talking to the customer.
In a larger company, sometimes something that makes it easier if when you have like a customer support representative that talks with either a support engineer or a solutions engineer. Usually that kind of person, he's able to translate that into a really readable bug. But that is not always the case. Whenever you get something directly with the customer, that is the problem.
I'm totally in favor of somebody who is a developer who is not actually writing code, talking to the customer and figuring out what the bug actually is. I'm totally in favor of a developer that doesn't write one line of code, but just explains the issues. I mean, because that particular person might be able to go, I looked into the code base, that line right there, line 45 of that class is exactly where the issue is. And then the developer that comes in to clean it up just goes, oh yeah, I see that, click, 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 let me just CICD it.
I love them.
Right? That's how it should be. A developer who understands code, sees the issue actually occurring, and can figure out what's actually the problem.
So what you're trying to say is that instead of being a modified version of a waterfall, by product owner getting it all from the customer and then giving it to the developer has to be the base of it.
Yes.
Around which
We work together. Yes. The developer is the key cog in this wheel. Like, you could take out every other person between the developer and the customer. If you took every single person between that, the process would still work. You take out the developer in that process and leave everybody else in place, nothing gets done. Who is the most important part of this?
So then again, it depends on the scale of how big the project is, how big.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Some other variable that actually, whenever you do a project, needs to take into consideration is how many stakeholders you have. And that is a problem. When you have a very large number of stakeholders, then they overwhelm the developers. You can have like 20 people requesting, and then the developer is like, oh my God, I cannot do anything because I get like, and that is the only caveat I will say that is when somebody needs to pretty much do a filter.
I can see what you're saying where I have a ton of people, but really what that should be is the number of stakeholders should be filtered, not the number of, It's, and who am I talking as a developer to actually funnel that information to? Because there should be someone on their side that I am talking to. They are my customer. I should not have to hire somebody on my side just to figure out how to talk to them. That is an undue responsibility on me as a developer. As from the development team, why should I have to figure out your organization? And what is important to you? Why should that be my responsibility? I understand collaboration, but that collaboration should be between somebody on their side and with me. All right. But that, of course, is not always going to happen, right? We know that that's not always going to happen.
Especially whenever you have like many departments that are stakeholders, right?
Yes.
Whenever you have a feature that sales, marketing, customer support, and then upper management and other products are involved, then you have like, even if you have one person, each one of the department, because all of them want that feature, they want to have input into that feature to be built correctly, then at that point it's the other case that you get like.
And I'm perfectly fine with all of those people. Maybe they aren't your point of contacts, but they come down for the product demo, right? Oh, you gotta go? Okay. Oh, thank you. I'm glad to see you. Okay, so moving on. discuss upcoming features. That's something we should be obviously doing, and we should also be asking the customer for advice. How can we improve this process? How can we, our side of this, improve what we're doing? Boy, I tell you what, that asking your customer how you can make things better, even if you don't always put it in place, boy, they're gonna really like you. They're gonna like you. Okay? Because wow, you're listening to what I have to say? You're not just telling me no? That is growing and getting larger on purpose. Make user stories. This is how you learn how to develop from the customer side of things. When you understand how they are going to use your product, a user story, for those of you who don't know, a user story is essentially where you actually write out how this particular type of person is going to use this particular feature that you're building. I'm going to do this. So it would be something like, I as an administrator will be able to add users to the system using the add users feature. That's a user story. Okay? Now I have just written that from the perspective of the user. How is the user going to use this thing that I'm about to build? Now every line of code that I write up should match that user story. I should not be writing any extra lines of code that don't get to that feature. If I'm doing something else, I'm doing too much. If I'm writing some other code that has nothing to do with that, then I'm not actually fulfilling my user story. That's why I do it. That's why I have that. Okay. Responding to change over following a plan. This is the fourth value of the Agile Manifesto. Responding to change over following a plan. New ideas, they kind of have a little bit more weight than having some sort of plan that you're all going to blindly follow. Responding to change over following a plan. If we had a system where we were responding to change and not so concerned with the plan, then we would have software that is easier to work with and less brittle. Because we are writing code specifically with the intent. That's the whole point of this. We are writing code that will respond to change. If we had the ability to respond to change, if our code base was able to respond to change, our software would be easier to work with. We would not be so worried about if I write this line of code, it's going to break that thing over there. Better time management. Again, that little prickly thing. Debugging is certainly a lot easier because I'm writing code that is easier to work with. Therefore, it is easier to debug. You also write less unnecessary code because how am I going to respond to change if I've got a whole bunch of other classes that do something else that have nothing to do with what it is I'm working on? I'm writing unnecessary code that makes it hard for me to track down how to change. I got to fix something in a bug, and I've got like 20 other things I got to comb through to go finally find that one thing where it's broken. Right? That's never fun. Is it, Howard? I think he was a little distracted. Code is easier to test. Code is easier to test because it's easier to work with. If it's easier to work with, debugging is easier. It's easier to test. All of these things are easier because we write in smaller little pieces that don't have extra stuff on them that I have to sort through. I just have to write that little bit of code to do that little thing, and I can test those little features. I write just enough tests to go cover that. If I write a whole bunch of other stuff, I have to write all the tests to go with that other stuff. Okay, so definitely, responding to change means that we have easier code to test. So how do we make that happen? That's the big question, right? We saw all these great nifty little things that would be really, really cool if we were able to respond to change, but what do we do to make that happen? Well, small iterations, like I was talking about. You don't write big, large chunks of code over 6 to 8 months. Because what happens if after month 3, the customer says, but I don't like that feature. I don't like the way you're writing it. Or, oh, I got a great idea. You know what? We're going to change from a database to strictly API calls. But I've got like 3 more months of planning just for the database integration. I can't just change that. Okay? But if we have small little iterations, if I do work 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then the customer comes and says, oh, but we need to switch over from a database to an API, you're like, yeah, okay. We do that. I don't have to change the whole plan. I don't have to get the project manager involved to reconfigure how much time we're going to spend, redo the velocity planning, try to figure all that out again. I have a short little iteration that I can plan for. Abstract classes, interfaces, yeah. Use those bad boys everywhere. Abstract classes and interfaces are the thing. They make responding to change possible. You would not believe how many interfaces I write in my code base. All because I literally demonstrated this once. I wrote an entire code base with every single component was an interface. From the highest top level to the lowest little tiny feature was swappable. Completely swappable. I could replace the entire operation of the application with 1 line of code. I could have the code doing this complete other application with 1 line change. Totally different. 1 line change. How many people could say that? The only reason why I could was because I abstracted the hell out of that thing. I have interfaces for everything. Now, you'll learn about interfaces when you become a developer, but abstract classes and interfaces allow us the flexibility in our code to do whatever we want at any moment's notice. Because I am not reliant upon a hard concrete class to do something. I rely upon the interface that tells me the members and the properties that I should expect. Now I can just code a new class to that spec, that interface, and now I just fix my code. I don't have to go into the pre-existing code and hope that I don't break something because I just basically rewrote it, but just use the same interface. I am flexible. I can easily swap one bad thing out for a good thing. All because I used abstract classes and interfaces instead of writing hard concrete classes. All right. Solid principles. Single responsibility principle. Single responsibility principle. A class should be responsible for one thing and one thing only. Same with a function. A function should only be responsible for one thing and one thing only. I take this to monumental extremes, and it serves me well. Open-close principle. Essentially, a really good example of that would be the strategy pattern. I am open for change, closed for modification. I can make changes in my code without actually modifying the currently existing stuff. Open for change, closed for modification. Liskov substitution principle. All right, this is the one that everybody always gets like, wait, I don't understand Liskov substitution principle. Essentially, it means if you write 2 classes that are both of the same base class, they should both be interchangeable. You should be able to take one and switch it with the other. That's what it means. Interface segregation principle. Instead of writing one big giant interface or abstract class, having all of these properties and methods that I should expect on one giant abstract class, break those up into tiny little ones. Smaller, smaller, smaller interface. It's called the interface segregation principle. It allows a lot of flexibility in your code. Because now if I need to build something, I can just pick and choose which of those interfaces am I saying I'm going to be implementing in this class. Okay? Dependency inversion principle. This is not dependency injection, dependency inversion principle. But dependency injection is a form of dependency inversion. Dependency injection is really, really cool because it goes along with abstract classes. I can very easily swap out. I can just say, instead of using that class, I want you to use that class. I do not have inheritance except for what I have to have for Microsoft classes. My code does not inherit from anything except interfaces and abstract classes. I have 0 base classes. That's why the Linscott substitution principle doesn't really apply to my code base. But dependency invert the heck out of that thing. All right. Make unit tests. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. This, I like test-driven development. Yes, I'm one of those guys. I use test-driven development. Why? Because I can click a button and know my whole application works from top to bottom. And if I change a line of code somewhere, I swap out a piece with another piece, I have all the testing in place. I have the testing harness in place to tell me that it still works. And I don't have to worry about it. I can still release it. Pop it in the CI/CD pipeline and we're good to go. Yeah. All right. TDD for the win. Test-driven development for the win. Write only what you need to fulfill the user story. Write only what you need to fulfill the user story, nothing more. This is where we get in trouble as developers. We go, oh, that's bright and shiny. I'm going to do it that way. Oh. Okay? We do that. Stop. Stop doing that. Boy Scout rule. Make the code better than how you found it. Boy Scout rule. Make it better than how you found it. How many of us do that? How many of us do that? Make it better than how we found it.
We have time.
If we have time. But I got a product owner that's just shoving this stuff down my throat. And I can't tell the customer I can't do it. All right. Write clean code. Clean code is a term you guys should get familiar with. Remember I was talking about how writing like functions, properly functioning, never having to comment them? Clean code. That's all principles that come from clean code. It's good stuff. All right. I was going to go through the new plan, but I think we've probably chewed up all the time. It looks very similar to Scrum. You have a customer, you have a planner possibly, which typically the planner, by the way, is typically, I want this to be the developer, but I understand it might be a product owner. They get the features. So for example, they get a list of features, user management, document storage, customer management, inventory management, pricing, vendor management. These are all features that the customer tells the planner, I'm going to call it planner, not product owner, planner. They are then going to write a user story for each one of those features and each one of the people who are going to use that feature. Okay, this is my sped up version. I'm going to take all of those features and add it to a backlog. The backlog has all the previous features that were requested by the customer, including some of the features that they don't even realize that they need. I go ahead and take that backlog and I'm going to slip those features into the backlog so that now I have an extra long backlog. What am I going to do with that big backlog? Well, I'm going to take it and I'm going to split it all out here into this unordered list here. Okay, keep going. Come on, come on. I'm just going to speed ahead. Okay, so we got an iteration here. What we're going to do is we're going to take this big block of code, all of these features, we're going to stick them into this iteration. But first, we need to define what is done. Done is actually everything that we know we're going to have to do in this iteration. Then we're going to take all the bugs, and after we've figured out what's done, we're going to take all the bugs, get them in there because that is first priority. You got to get the bugs fixed. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to take all of these things, but we're going to order them in order of priority. So this is first, this is second, third, fourth, fifth. This, if we don't get the login, no big deal. Okay, moving on. So now we've got the user stories. They got to go with all of these features. They got to get done. So now we're going to take all of this iteration. We're going to break it down into tasks. We're all going to get together. We're all going to figure out exactly what we have to do in order to achieve each one of these features. So we're going to put it in this task list. Now, what do we do with the task list? Well, that task list is going to go into something called a Kanban board. How many of you have heard of a Kanban board? Okay, great, thank you. So we're going to move on. We got a task list here. We got all of our tasks. Okay, they're all there. Okay, keep going, come on. Okay, now we're going to move each one of the tasks over from our task list into our in progress. That's whenever one of our developers is actually working on it. Now, once we're done with in progress, we're going to move it over to the done phase. Now, that's only if we actually have it done. Remember, we defined done. Now, we should also have QA testing in there somewhere because that is part of what defines what is done. Now, once we have it done, we're done. Okay. Plan is a cycle. Plan as a cycle. Collect the user stories and features, add the features to the backlog, pick the features for iteration, create your task list, go to the Kanban board, move stuff around until it's done, do the cycle again. What about the user stories? Well, those user stories that you've been keeping around, they are your acceptance tests. They are what tell you whether or not you've actually done what you said you would do. So acceptance tests are the definition of done, essentially. So wrap up, 4 core values: individual interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following a plan, the new planning strategy that we just talked about, collect features into the backlog, get user stories, select and order the most important features for your iteration, define what is done, create a task list based on features, and add task list to the Kanban board. And then finally, track the task progress until it is done. Some additional concepts you might want to look into: the Pomodoro. It is Italian for tomato. Great little story behind that, Pomodoro. Velocity, test-driven development, behavior-driven development, feature-driven development, solid principles, clean coding practices, Scrum, extreme programming, and lean software development. These 3, Scrum, extreme programming, and lean software development, are all types of Agile value system. They're not entirely processes, but you would classify them as processes that people use. Pomodoro, velocity, test-driven development, behavior-driven development, feature-driven development, solid principles, clean coding practices, Scrum, extreme programming, and lean software development. And that is it.
How about Kanban?
Kanban board?
Like Kanban, the whole methodology of Kanban.
Yeah. Yes, that would also be another one. Yeah, that is considered Agile. I consider it a subset of Agile. Like, it's not the whole thing. It's just a tool that you can use to be more Agile. So. All right. Did we have any online questions? I didn't see.
Yeah.
Oh.
I guess you were very clear.
Good. I was perfect. How many people did we end up getting? Okay.
I have left. So
Yeah, okay. Jorge's still there. Jorge. You're good. Any questions, guys?
I think one of the questions that I have, so you mentioned that just based on your last comment that you see Kanban more as the Kanban board.
Yeah.
Usually, whenever I do like the project, I usually try to define if it's better to move it between Scrum or Kanban.
Mm-hmm.
Based on the nature of the project, I go from one methodology versus the other one.
Yeah. I think you might have saw in my quick little explanation, what I like to do is take basically the backlog, break it out into the tasks, and then the tasks individually go onto the Kanban board. It's a little different than what some people might do, of just basically taking the whole feature basically and sticking it on the Kanban board. I would rather break it down into the individual tasks that must be accomplished and put that up on the Kanban board, because then that makes sense for swim lanes too.
It does make sense.
Right? Because now I have specific tasks. I may have a feature that requires several different disciplines like QA, software, a senior dev, a DBA. These different people might be involved in the process, and we've got to put those tasks into their swim lanes to accomplish it. Okay, before the feature is even considered done. Otherwise, it just sits there in a column and is kind of ambiguous about who's the next person to work on something. I don't even know, right? So.
How about defining a custom workflow? So you pretty much you use with the simplified of like to do, in progress, and done.
Yes.
What do you believe about the when should you use the simplified method versus a custom workflow that actually have all the steps that is following the
I believe that at its heart, I understand the idea, but I think it is breaking Agile. Okay? Because essentially what you should have is flexibility, right? We should be able to respond to change. If we have a stagnant workflow that we must work through, that kind of goes against the spirit of what Agile is all for. So let me see here if I can find. So individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And what you're speaking to is taking a Kanban board and turning it into a process through a complex workflow.
Yeah, more so. Yeah. Usually the benefit of doing the not simplified is whenever you're working with different teams, they can actually have like, okay, so pretty much we'll have a dev team, so we own these columns. So if we have a task over there, somebody in our team is working on it. And then we have the QA team that the QA team is going to work. Then you throw, especially if you don't have like a cohesive team.
But what if I, as a developer, can hit something on the QA side?
You can actually do it on the, can you?
But it seems like we're not sticking to the processes. Is somebody going to get mad about that?
In theory, no, because it's the,
in theory.
Well, nobody's supposed to be, because that is the team's Kanban board, right?
Right. I totally, like, if everybody's cool with everybody basically messing with everybody's tasks, sure. I mean, is that going to happen? Maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe. But I think it's very easy. Like, this is the focus that happens. Oh, we need to take this and turn it into a process, right? We want to take this and turn it into a company process. And the moment you start thinking that way is the moment that this breaks down.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think the major problem is when you have management itself looking at what is working on what, and then since you have only one in progress, you have like in progress because it's in progress, but it's not the developer that is working on it. It's like another team that is working on it, and then you have everything convoluted into one column, and then that is the main problem. Well, it's more about the management, the communication, and oversee of management.
And if that's the case, then that means that particular feature was not broken down enough, right? We didn't break that into the appropriate sized features, right? Now, that's why I prefer with using a Kanban board to break it down into the individual tasks.
And I've got
a break the feature down into, okay, what do we have to do to get the feature done? Put those tasks onto the Kanban board. Not the whole backlog, just the tasks.
That makes sense. Yeah.
That to me is how I would use a Kanban board. Yeah. Obviously, everybody can do whatever they want. Yeah. Okay. Any more questions? Head now?
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Howard.
Just see a scenario. So if you have a team of developers already and someone new coming on board, you would say, just go hit the code base because we have zero documentation. And you just set the code base.
Yeah,
you might be
essentially.
the code.
Yeah, especially if the team is disciplined enough to have proper naming. Like we've decided on a naming convention that we're all going to agree on because it makes sense to us. Right? That's an important conversation to have.
But you had architectural level.
Yes.
You said no.
From an architectural perspective, I might have drawn out, I would say no, because I let the directory structure make that for me, right? Because I use a feature-based full array structure. I do not, this is a really good one. MVC, I think MVC is an anti-pattern. MVC is an anti-pattern.
What you is not going back to the page model.
Yes, we have Razor pages, thank God. But yes, I believe MVC is an anti-pattern. Only because you essentially are taking unrelated components and sticking them together into a folder. Why are you doing that? You're grouping your code into folders of things that don't even relate to each other. A great example of that, if I take the template, an MVC template, if I go make an MVC template right out of ASP.NET Core, what's on my home controller? Home, like I got index, about, contact us, and an error page. What do all 4 of those things have in common with each other? Nothing. Why are they in the same class? I have 4 functions that all have nothing to do with each other. Why are they in the same class? This makes absolutely no sense to me, but that's how it comes out of the box. And then I've got my views over here in this folder, and I've got my models over here in this folder, and I might have my view models over in this folder. Now, if I am a brand new person coming to the code base, where do I go to fix the about page? I have no idea. But if I have a feature folder structure where I say features, home page, index, or about page, contact us page. Oh, there's the about us page. Let me go in there. There's my controller. There's the models for it. There's the view model for it, etc. I go right into that folder to go look for where the problem is. Right? That is the pattern we should be using. If we move everything into controllers, models, views, where do I go to fix things? And then I have subfolders underneath that. I don't have to go search through. Oh, please. And as a brand new developer, right? As a brand new developer, this is like, where do I go for any of this stuff? I'm going to be asking my senior developer for all this information for like the next year before I'm going to understand the code base. But if you do it feature foldering, where you have each feature as its own folder, then you will know where to go find all the code that relates to that feature. That is what we should be doing, at least in my opinion. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before.
Thanks.
I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are. I know I speak very vigorously about this stuff, so.
Well, I'm just curious about documentation. So you go with even probably from the
Yeah, I do. I just think that if we were smarter about the way we organized our code and the way we named it, we would eliminate all the need for documentation. But if that was like Uncle Bob Martin says, consider it a development challenge. Consider it a challenge about how to make your code better. How can I eliminate documentation? If I write cleaner, better code. If I write cleaner, better code, it's going to make the reader much better off when they come into my code base to understand what's going on.
But that's the idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I completely 100% admit it is the ideal. It is not always what's going to happen. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't have ideals. Yeah.
How about if you're actually building a product that is highly regulated?
So in that particular case, obviously we would have to have some documentation. I would only do as much as they tell me I need to.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, never overdo what I don't have to overdo.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, there are obviously will be times, like if I'm working on a HIPAA application or something like that, where for insurance purposes, they needed to look at a particular way and have certain documentation backing it. Yeah, absolutely. Especially API side. Like I understand if I'm going to have an API that somebody's going to have to plug into, I'm going to have documentation for that so people can use my API. But that's what Swagger's for, right?
Makes sense.
I don't have to do it because Swagger did it. All right. I think we probably run out all the time. Thanks for attending, Jorge. I hope it was enjoyable. Thank you, Howard. Hope to see you again. Okay. I'm going to shut her down here. I would like to invite you guys that if you are interested in doing a talk here, you guys are more than welcome to.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I know a lot of these different meetup groups and stuff are always looking for, I have a chat. If anybody has questions. Oh, that was
It was me.
That was you.
I just wanted to let people know that they could ask questions.
Yes, absolutely. All right, we're going to end the meeting here.